European nations started to form trading companies that were given monopolies on certain crops, such as the Dutch East India Company. Improvements and inventions in boating helped propel sea trade, such as the caravel, magnetic compass, and the astrolabe. Spain set up colonies in the Philippines, East Indies, Central America, and South America. Portugal focused on setting up trading ports in Africa, Indonesia, India, and controlled territory in Brazil. Britain settled many places around the world, such as eastern North America.
The Columbian Exchange was the exchange of livestock, crops, and diseases between the Old and New World. Corn, tobacco, manioc, and other crops were introduced to the Old World. Coffee, horses, wheat, and sugarcane were introduced to the New World.
Young male slaves were needed to help work on plantations and encomiendas in the European colonies.
Slaves were traded along the Middle Passage, which was a leg of triangular trade. France and England were in constant rivalry during this time, engaging in the French and Indian War.
Ottomans conquered the Byzantine Empire and Constantinople during this time.
The Treaty of Tordesillas was established by the Catholic Church that split new lands between Portugal and Spain.
Meanwhile, Akbar of the Mughal Empire fought for Hindu and Muslim cooperation.
After a Muslim dominance in trade through the Silk Road, Europeans found a way around Africa and became the dominant traders in the Indian Ocean. There was also continual conflict between Muslims and Christians. China and Japan continued to remain mainly secular in trade. War technology changed when guns and cannons became widely used.
The world's greatest naval power went from Spain to England after Spain's armada was defeated by Britain's navy. European states' navies grew more and more important as they needed to control all their overseas territories. Throughout the Old World, there was a growth in population due to the spread of food crops from the Americas.
In the New World, there was a population decline due to the spread of diseases brought over from the Old World.
More than 15.3 million Africans made their way to the Americas through the slave trade.
Large plantations in the Americas altered the environment by clearing away large areas of land. Irish, Scottish, German, and English indentured servants made their way to these lands to work on the plantations also. Missionaries such as the Jesuits were establishing missions all over the world in places like the Americas. Spanish colonies remained very hierarchical like Spain, with many different class levels. In Mughal India and the Ottoman Empire, women wore veils and were forced to stay indoors. Peter the Great began to allow women to attend public events, but harsh serfdom continued in Russia during this time. During the scientific revolution, people began to question religions and seek answers using science rather than the Bible. The Enlightenment promoted the use of reason to improve society.
A monk named Martin Luther began protesting acts of the Catholic Church, particularly selling indulgences. The Catholics didn't like this and excommunicated him. Protestant churches sharing Luther's ideas began emerging in Europe. His ideas were helped spread by the printing press.
In England, the Catholic Church wouldn't approve King Henry's divorce, so he broke away from them and started the Church of England. Nationalism started to emerge in the European states. It helped to form states with a common culture, language, and identity, as well as increased rivalries between nations.
States in Europe were either an absolute monarchy or a parliamentary monarchy. Absolute monarchies gave total power to the monarch and believed in divine right. Parliamentary monarchies split the power between representatives and the monarch. France was an absolute monarchy, while England was a parliamentary monarchy.
Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492, opening up trade and the New World. During 1450 to 1750 was a period of conquest and expansion for the Ottoman Empire. The empire prospered under a line of sultan rule. Under Selim, the empire became a dominant naval power, controlling much of the Mediterranean. The Ottoman Empire gains great victories over Christian armies. Also, France and the Ottoman Empire form alliances during this time in opposition to the ruling Habsburg family. The Ottoman Empire overcame European expansion until 1683, when the Battle of Vienna marked the end of Ottoman expansion in Europe. Up through 1750, we see many Ottoman territories separating and seceding to become independent countries. The Janissary was a huge part of the Ottoman military. They were Christian prisoners trained to fight on foot with large guns. The Devshirme was created as a draft system to keep numbers in the army up. In the decline, the Janissaries took too much power from the government and began to stop their training to form their own elite class. Dynastic rule dominated China during this time. The Ming and the Qing dynasty were the dominant ones from 1450 to 1750. The Ming is known for establishing the Great Wall. The Ming were later replaced by the Manchu people in 1644, but the Ming Empire is the one most known for the glorification of China. Neo-Confucianism was the main religion in China. They also faced many difficulties, such as having difficult borders to guard, armies that were expensive to maintain, and transportation and communication issues. In 1415, we see the first Portuguese colony in North Africa. Portugal was the first European kingdom to explore other lands. Throughout the 15th century, Portuguese explorers sailed the coast of Africa, establishing trading ports. In 1498, Vasco da Gama reached India and brought economic prosperity to Portugal. In 1500, Portuguese sailors discovered Brazil and claimed it for themselves. During this time, Portugal achieved great wealth and dominance through extracting resources from their overseas colonies. There were many disputes between Spain and Portugal over these newfound lands.
The first effort by England to settle in the Americas was in 1583 in Newfoundland. It was led by Sir Humphrey Gilbert, and it failed. A year later, an attempt to settle on Roanoke Island failed. In 1606, private investors from London decided to colonize in Virginia. A year later, 144 settlers landed in Jamestown, which was the first successful English colony. Patterns of French settlement were more closely related to Spain and Portugal than England. Their main goals were the extraction of fur and missionary acts, like the Jesuits trying to convert natives to Christianity. The French waited over 50 years before settling in North America. The colony of New France in Quebec was settled in 1608. The European market for fur is what fueled the French settlements. In France and England, controversies between theologic and religious ideas broke out. People were becoming more educated, and technologies like the printing press were being invented. John Calvin from France became a highly influential Protestant leader during this time. He was inspired by Martin Luther, who developed Lutheranism while protesting against the Catholic Church. Because of the Protestant Reformations, wars of religion were being fought in Western Europe until 1648. England and France were settling colonies in the Americas during this time. Like the Spanish and Portuguese, the settlers responded to the natives with a mix of diplomacy and violence.
Spain, as well as Portugal, were mainly focused on expanding and exploring during this time. Both countries are renowned for this time as being the heralds of the age of the exploration. In 1492, Columbus discovered America during a voyage sponsored by Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. During this time, the Spanish Empire expanded to include huge parts of the Americas as well as Asian Pacific Islands and areas in North Africa. Also during this time, we see the beginning of the Spanish Inquisition. This is where people in Spain, especially Jews, were forced to convert to Catholicism or face expulsion or death.